1890, June 30th, Jim Porter establishes the Stark Post Office and Store. Jim's daughter, Sarah Martin, said Jim Porter named Stark, but post office history says Thomas Thompson did. I'm going to turn that over to you if you want to elaborate on anything there.
Jim Porter, this is Andrew Porter's oldest son. Andrew Porter's son, not his oldest son. Jim Porter. He's the one buried right back here. He's the one that was killed in 1906 in Sandy Hook over school elections, from what I was told from different old-timers, by Henry Kegley. But Jim Porter was a hothead, and I think he brought it on himself. They say he came at Henry Kegley with the chair to hit him, and Kegley turned around and stabbed him. But that's this Jim Porter. The Stark Post Office and Store, I think, was very close to the church.
Yes, it was right across the road from where it is now. It was set right under a big, I think it's a maple tree or a poplar tree, very big tree. It's set right there in the vicinity, right there in the curve, and very in the head of the holler is where the store said. I want to say something about here on the Masonic Lodge. It says Jim and Steve Porter, members of the Sandy Hook Mason Lodge. They ran together. The Masonic Lodges in the Methodist Church was, I won't say simultaneously or connected, but they was pretty close. It was the mentality that they just run together. Now, this is a free offshoot, but the Nazarene Church is an offshoot of the Methodist Church, and one of their guidelines, and I think it's still today, is that you cannot be a member of the Masonic Lodge and be a member. Am I right? She's shaking her head.
Now, I understand it was a 2-story log building
at Stark, yes,
when
sir.
they built it. Have you ever found a picture of that?
No, I'd love to have a picture of it.
Well, I found a picture. Here's the corner of it.
Okay, that's it.
There's a 2-story church that it was a log church, and they put siding on it later.
Flatboard siding or weatherboard, yeah.
So that's the only picture I found of it so far.
That's good. That's better than I've found. One thing too, I found this for a little side note on the construction of it. They cut the timber. I was telling Scott about this today. They cut the timber, say 6 to 8 months in advance of building it. They had the season in the log, and I had never thought about that concept. You know, log structure building is something that's not very prone to be happening today. But they cut that and seasoned it, and you know, the old timers had certain ways of doing things. You do it in the signs, you know, in the bows or something. It won't, you know, just all kinds of things. So there was a lot of. It wouldn't just go out here, get a band mill in here, and let's saw us out a barn pattern or a building pattern. I mean, it was a major undertaking. And plus, these people they was dedicated enough to put money into it, which was very hard to come by then. They was dedicated enough to come and do the work in the church and to help build it when they had crops and mouths to feed. I mean, there was a lot to it. 1895, April 27th, Stark, formerly known as Wimberley, was under pastorate of R.F. Rice. Then he returned for meetings. James Skeens has the class meeting assisted by Reverend Porter. And I believe this is the article that was written by Merida Flannery. If it's right.
I was going to talk about her.
Go ahead.
But who were you just talking about?
Merida Flannery.
That was the newspaper article.
Yes, the newspaper article was written. She was the first lady congressman in the state of Kentucky. Really? She lived right there in Stark. I think her husband was John Elliott. Very prominent. And 1896, May 9th, greatest revival. Reverends Vansant and Porter.
Yeah.
Charlie Vansant, John Vansant.
And I think that was a John Van. Yeah, John Van. Is that his dad, Charlie Vansant's dad?
I'm pretty sure it is, yes.
Okay. I want to throw one in here, a real quick story that Harlan mentioned. He was talking about Reverend Steve Porter. And in a lot of these newspaper articles that Brian found, it talks about Reverend Porter going here for revival, going there for revival. And maybe we're not even to it yet. It was in the 1890s and the early 1900s. But he was going all over for revivals, just constantly. He was a busy guy. So Harlan said he could do it. My dad said he worked like a slave all his life. He's talking about Reverend Steve Porter, Harlan's uncle. He said Uncle Levi would walk right off at corn planting time, maybe get the corn planted. Said he would go up through Elliott County, hold a revival. I guess he was comparing Steve to his brother Levi. But he would go through Elliott County, hold a revival. He'd be gone 2 or 3 weeks at a time. But he said Steve would starve to death. He said Uncle Steve lived better than Harlan's dad Alex did all of his life, and at least that's what my dad Alex told me. Steve will starve to death. He said the family would, and I think what he was saying, Steve was so committed to preaching the gospel that he would, he wasn't worried about himself.
You mean that's right.
He said the family would go ahead with the crop. Now, used to be, you could say anywhere in Elliott County, of course, a big bunch of people are dead now, but they would say, hey, are you any kin to Steve Porter? He was known throughout an awful big territory. So everybody knew Steve Porter. He went everywhere doing these revivals, different counties, even different states.
Steve Porter, Vansant, a man named Henry Catron, I think is how you pronounce it. I believe he's buried out here on 504, going on what was told to me called the Merida Waddell Hill.
That guy bought Andrew Porter's farm.
Okay.
When Andrew Porter first came here at Merida Waddell, Andrew Porter, when he first came here from Virginia, he bought 150 acres. He only owned it for a few years, then they moved over to Robertson County, but that Merida Waddell is who bought it from him.
Okay.
So wherever that land is, that's where our Porters were originally.
Well, I'm pretty sure that would be on top of the hill on 504 going before you get to Elliott Field.
Yeah.
Is that right?
That's the old Waddell farm.
Yeah.
That's the Meredith Waddell farm?
It's Merida, is what it's
Merida.
read on the listen to me. Road on the top of the Merida Waddell.
Okay.
As that would be the Greenup County pronunciation. And in Elliott County, it's Merida Waddell. So that's you go north, it gets a little bit more highfalutin, I guess.